things, and we call this the Bad Scary Guns Amendment. To help everybody understand what this amendment is for, we call it the Bad Scary Guns Amendment. And in fact, the everything else includes bad scary guns. Now, we have heard a lot of frightened people talk about, and the bad scary guns that we're talking about here, because that's how loosey-goosey this bill is now, or will be if it passes, and we always live in hope. And that loosey-goosey control or lack of control will apply to these bad scary guns. The change in the law is to allow these bad scary guns to proliferate in our communities and get in the wrong hands and get in the hands of criminals. Some of them they might not think are bad and scary, like sawed-off shotguns with 12-gauge, double-barrel 12-gauge shotguns that are actually manufactured the same shape and size as a sawed-off shotgun, same shape and size, with a 12.5-inch barrel. In fact, it's called the Outlaw, and that's what its manufacturer calls it. It's called the Outlaw shotgun, and you can buy it for $300, $300 according to the advertisements. This is they call it, you can stick it in your backpack. Now, what you want a 12-gauge double-barrel sawed-off shotgun for in your backpack, I'm not sure. But the people who saw off shotguns are often, as some members opposite who've been engaged in the why they're illegal is because people saw them off so they can conceal them.
We've often in the argument around this talked about hunters and farmers, but the Ruger Mini 14, the Swiss Army Black Special, and the Steyr 50 sniper rifle that has killed a target at up to 2.5 kilometers away and pierces Kevlar armor is not what the hunters and farmers in my part of the world use when they're going after moose or deer.
When you're letting loose these bad scary guns transferred willy-nilly in our society. There's a habit amongst gun manufacturers to actually change the model numbers, make slight modifications to their guns for the sole purpose of them fitting into one category or another. And under our criminal code, and I haven't looked at this particular schedule lately, but there's a schedule of guns that are listed as restricted, and they're very detailed. The manufacturer, the name, the model number. So a manufacturer of guns, all they have to do is change the model number, and then it's not on the list anymore. And they probably have to make some modification to demonstrate that it is actually a different gun. But this is, I understand, a habit of gun manufacturers, and I think anybody involved in law enforcement would be aware of that. Mr. Cullen tells me, and maybe he'll make, he made this speech privately, but apparently a whole episode of The West Wing, the famous TV show about what goes on in the United States White House, was devoted to how gun manufacturers get around the gun laws. And they talked a big conversation about what they do, the specifics that they do to make that happen.
It's clear that the types of weapons that we're talking about here are intended for one consequence only. You don't buy a sniper rifle that can shoot somebody at 2.5 kilometers to go out with your friends hunting deer on the weekend.
And the bad scary guns that we're talking about here,
this is a different animal. This is a different gun. And the law-abiding hunters and farmers that I represent don't want to be associated to any piece of legislation that would enable anyone to get easier access to these weapons. So this is
also throwing out the registration requirements of guns like these semi-automatics, like these assault weapons, like the guns that were used in the Montreal massacre at the Polytechnique in 1989 on December the 6th, the anniversary being next Tuesday.
Consumer tastes of gun owners are fast changing as shooters eschew vintage hunting rifles in favor of the latest, quote, tactical, unquote, military-style weapons, many of which appear in movies and popular video games such as Call of Duty. As a new generation of young men become interested in shooting but not hunting, retailers are trying to meet the growing demand for sleek firearms. Canadian
and the bad scary guns that we're talking about here.
Authorities, meanwhile, facing the repeal of the long gun registry by the federal government, are worried about the trend. And that's what really came to mind when I saw the very useful photographs that Mr. Cullen showed us. I mean, these are obviously not gopher guns. They're not meant to protect farms from rodents, including gophers. One can't imagine what these would be used for.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here
In the daily conduct of a farming business, Chair. Now, the demographics are changing. We don't understand the new demographics of gun ownership. I mean, perhaps these individuals are no different in their attitudes and comportment than legitimate hunters and farmers, but we just don't know. We haven't done the research on this.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here.
So gun reclassification can happen and should happen from time to time.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here.
It would send a signal to the RCMP, to others, that reclassification is an ongoing matter, and that the reclassification is required. It will be required.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here.
I saw pictures of some of these weapons that are going to be freely distributed, that anyone could easily purchase an unlimited number of these long guns.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here.
We're looking for the Conservatives to understand that the mandate they were given by Canadians, by law-abiding hunters and farmers, was not a mandate to let this gun more into society. This isn't the guns that Candace and I have talked about. This isn't the gun that can kill somebody at 2.5 kilometers and pierce Kevlar armor.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here, we wanted to make sure that only long guns for hunting or sport could be classified as non-restricted, and the bad, scary guns that we talked about don't get into that category. We want and put in these loosey-goosey regulations that you have.
Because there's no law-abiding gun owner that any of us represent that wants to see more sniper rifles in Canadian society.
The change in the law to allow these bad, scary guns to proliferate in our communities and get in the wrong hands and get in the hands of criminals.
Or more urban combat weapons. That's not what this is about.
The change in the law to allow these bad, scary guns to proliferate in our communities and get in the wrong hands and get in the hands of criminals.
The government didn't sit and design a bill that would allow urban assault rifles to be more easily acquired by organized crime. That's clearly
the change in the law to allow these bad, scary guns to proliferate in our communities and get in the wrong hands and get in the hands of criminals.
Because you cannot suggest that allowing more sniper rifles into society, more assault weapons into society, somehow has no consequence. That everyone will buy those weapons, secure those weapons, transfer those weapons without any record or acknowledgement, any verification that the person's allowed to actually have the weapon, and there be no consequences to it.
And the bad, scary guns that we're talking about here.
Mr. Chair, I do just want to begin by saying I always get a little nervous when the NDP starts showing bad, scary guns and saying that they are guns that won't have to be registered, because we know what happened over the weekend. The bad, scary guns that you showed were actually restricted firearms. So
vote?
Yes.
All right. Shall the bill carry? Andrew?
Mr. Aspin? Yes. Madam Hepner?
Yes.
Mr. Leaf?
Yes.
Mr. Norlock?
Yes.
Mr. Rathgeba?
Yes.
Madam Young?
Yes.
Mr. Bevington?
No.
Madam Boivin?
No.
Mr. Cullen?
No, it should not.
Mr. Harris?
No.
Mr. Scarpalagia?
No.
I count.
All right. So the bill carries. Shall I report the bill to the House?
No.
All in favor? And that is carried on division. All right.